The familiar firm does not have to prove it is the best. It only has to feel easier to choose. A buyer can believe the specialist is more capable and still default to a known name, category, or approach. The reason is not always trust. Familiarity lowers the organizational cost of making, explaining, and defending the decision. Most specialists assume the strongest expertise should win once buyers compare qualifications. But high-stakes decisions involve uncertainty, time pressure, and multiple stakeholders. Buyers are also judging how much explanation, coordination, and personal exposure each option creates. The best fit can lose when the familiar alternative is easier for the organization to process. This is the familiarity to default path. Familiarity, perceived safety, defensibility, and default choice. It shows how recognition becomes a decision advantage. Familiarity provides context. Context makes the option feel more predictable. Predictability makes the decision easier to defend. And when several credible firms remain, the defensible choice often becomes the default. The first stage is familiarity. The buyer already recognizes the firm, its category, or its approach. That recognition is not proof of superior capability. It simply means the buyer does not have to construct the meaning of the choice from scratch. Everyone involved begins with a shared mental frame, so less interpretation is required. The second stage is perceived safety. The buyer may not know the firm will succeed, but the familiar choice feels easier to anticipate. Stakeholder reactions seem more predictable, and the decision creates less novelty. Familiarity does not eliminate project risk. It reduces the perceived risk surrounding the act of choosing. The third stage is defensibility. A choice becomes defensible when the buyer can explain why it was reasonable. The familiar option arrives with language, expectations, and comparisons that other stakeholders already understand. The unfamiliar specialist may require a new category, a new explanation, and a stronger argument for departing from the expected choice. The final stage is default choice. When several firms appear credible, the option with the lowest explanation and coordination burden can become the path of least resistance. The buyer is not necessarily selecting the strongest firm. They may be selecting the least difficult credible choice. This creates a hidden disadvantage for specialists. The familiar firm often needs to confirm what the buyer already expects. The unfamiliar specialist has to win twice. First, prove the work is credible and relevant. Second, prove that choosing a less familiar option is itself safe. The specialist is also competing against the convenience of an existing mental frame. Think about Company A and Company B. Company A may be the more capable specialist, but it feels unfamiliar. That creates more questions, more explanation, and more internal resistance. Company B is already known and easier to place. It may not be better, but the choice feels easier to justify. When both firms appear credible, familiarity can lower the decision burden and make Company B the safer default. The key takeaway is simple. You do not need every buyer to know your name. You need the right buyers to recognize what problem you solve and why choosing you is credible and safe. To see where your firm may be creating friction in the buyer's mind, take the Authority Gap quiz at trailblazermastery.com/quiz.